when I write, I know that the final product of it is going to be larger than myself. In my writing, because I write from the imagination, I recreate reality, as one does in a poem or in a play or in a novel. Because all my experiences in life are poured into my writing in different ways. And what I mean is that I won't be conscious now that I am using this history, or I'm using that history, I'm using it. But I know that there is a collective knowledge among us in this country, and a collective consciousness of our history. I'm a great believer in our ancestors, and because our ancestors are the closest to us that we understand, isn't that so?
That's correct.
They're the closest.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I don't want to have to go very far away. The ancestors are here, and they are ever present. Those are our ancestors. They come back 3.3 million years ago. Right? Isn't that so? And you. They are there. They are a linkage that you cannot escape, in the same way as you can't escape from your history. Some people want to live outside their history, but it's impossible. And I think the apartheid people tried to do that, to live outside the history, but by which I mean live outside their own nature.
Right.
They did a number of things which are against their own nature. I'm sure they violated their nature, and that's trying to live outside of history. So much of our writing does that, and you go right across the continent, isn't that so? And the writers talk to you, and when they talk to you, you say, "My, these people are talking about West Africa, they're talking about maybe East Africa, but these are also us." Isn't that so? They're also talking about us, and we live the same dreams, we live the same nightmares. We live the same kind of aspirations, same ambitions. That's right.
I think, as always, writers are a mirror through which we see ourselves. They seek to put meaning to things that ordinary people would normally take for granted. They make inquiries going beyond the ordinary boundaries, and then seek to explain those hidden meanings of activities, actions, things to people. And in that role, they also sometimes play the role of, they are indeed, not sometimes, but most of the time, they are nation builders.
The poem that really had a great impact on my life was To You, My People. And from that point on, I saw the importance of releasing oneself from some of the stereotypes and working towards a better expression of one's music. And as a musician, a trumpet player for that matter, reading some of Professor Mphahlele's works tells you that as an artist, you are a prophet. And a prophet he has messages that they bring to the people. And so I developed a style of playing. I developed a way of thought that is based really on his philosophies, to where one can liberate themselves from some of the powers that be, but to find an expression and believe in oneself.
You go back to his writing, beginning with A Man Must Live and other stories, right on until the work that he wrote, say, in 2001. Here's somebody who has looked at tragedy and has seen society going through a number of tragedies. And he says, we can outlive this tragedy. We can become ourselves. We can be sustainable. We can be independent people with independent thinkers. And this is the thing that even now he still cries about, that you don't find amongst Africans enough intellectual capacity to uplift the society from where it is. So long before the concept of African Renaissance became fashionable in the 60s, Mphahlele was talking about African Renaissance.
It is the lingering melody of a song that moves me more than the initial experience itself. It is the lingering pain of a past insult that rankles and hurts me more than the insult itself. Too dumb to tell you how immensely this music or that play or this film moves me, I wait for the memory of the event. I have never known why we, my brother, sister and I, were taken to the country when I was 5. We went to live with our grandmother, paternal grandmother. My father and mother remained in Pretoria where they both worked. My father a shop messenger in an outfitter's firm, mother as a domestic servant. That was in the autumn of 1924. Looking back to those first 13 years of my life, as much of it as I can remember, I cannot help thinking it was time wasted. I had nobody to shape them into a definite pattern. Searching through the confused threads of that pattern, a few things keep imposing themselves on my whole judgment. My grandmother, the mountain, the tropical darkness which glowworms seem to try in vain to scatter, long black tropical snakes, the brutal Lishowana River carrying on its broad back trees, cattle, boulders, world of torrential rains, the solid shimmering heat beating down on yearning earth, the romantic picture of a woman with a child on her back and an earthen pot on her head, silhouetted against the mirage.
The mountain dark I always talk about in down 2nd Avenue is something that is always stuck in my mind. Till this day, I still dream about this mountain and the darkness. The glowworms, the fireflies, which used to fill the mountain, especially on dark nights, were always so just frightening.
Lishowana, a mighty broad river with white sand. Legend had it those days that a cluster of stars had fallen from grace and were thrown out of the heavens, and on their way down they were changed to sand, white sand. This had heaped up and later washed into the Lishowana. Tame when dry, but fierce power in flood this river. On one side of the river were Christian communities, living together according to whether they were Methodists, Presbyterians, Dutch Reformists. On the other side, they were tribal kraal communities. The Christians called them heathens. We were often told there were witches among the heathens, so we were not to walk in their footprints if we knew they walked there. We were told to hold our breath when we passed them because they smeared witches' fat on their bodies. We were told not to stray among their villages because they were addicted to whipping Christians. But we often went across to look for lost goats or donkeys, and they received us warmly, if not with aloofness, at their communal fireplaces.
When I see Lishowana now, when I see Shakaro as it is now, or with so much sand and stones on the surface, it says something says to me, my word, that river has been defeated, and it is dead. You know, it was so fierce those days, you could never cross it.
During those highly impressionable years as a herd boy in the Mphahlele district, I got to know fear. Fear of the dark, fear of high mountains in which I had to spend hours looking for lost cattle or hunting rabbits, fear of rivers that tumbled down, uprooting trees and boulders. I got to know the cruelties and benignities of nature. Then I became an urban dweller in Pretoria, where I had been born. I came to love it, in that mindless way a child can be said to love a place, with all its filth, odors, terrors, poverty, death. Because of the memory of those years when we seemed to grow up casually, when we were always liable to be crushed by the life Pretoria and Cape Town had planned for us, I cannot today help feeling nostalgic about the sense of community we shared in Marabastad. Nostalgic even about the smells, the taste and the texture of life as we experienced it in those days. Even though I would not want to live in a slum again. Never. Those terrors of rural and urban life became rooted in me so that I could never, even in my adult life, outgrow them. They haunt my dreams today. They help define my responses to life wherever I live it, among other humans and in my books. Saturday night. Darkness. Sounds of snoring from my uncle at the corner, like the muted lowing of a cow. The only door and the only window are shut. Hot. I can't sleep. I can't get up to walk about the yard because my bones are aching, because I was cleaning the house and turning everything up and choking in the dust I was making. Sweating. Tins of beer dug into the floor behind the stack and the strong smell of fermenting malt and grey spots on the floor around the holes. No policeman will find it easily. Policeman. Saturday night. The men in uniform may even now be sniffing about the yard. Far to the west end of Marabastad, a police whistle. The barking of dogs. Saturday night and it is 10 to 10. 10 to 10. 10 to 10 for the black man to be out of the streets, to be at home, to be out of the policeman's reach. Year after year, every night, the sound of the bell floats in the air 10 minutes to 10. And the black man must run home. And the black man must sleep or have a night special permit. And so black man, you must run wherever you are, run. Whistle sound dies away. The bell stops, but still I cannot sleep because my back is aching, and I'm trying to stop my tears of pain.
In Down 2nd Avenue, I think he really tells about the South Africa of those days. Simple and straightforward. And I believe that that book has been translated into a number of languages because it sort of captures the country at a particular point in history. And to me, this is important. And that is why even today, it still makes a very, very interesting read for many of us and even for readers in schools.
One thing that has a great resonance with me is how he writes from a particular autobiographical stance. Everything that he writes, it starts with him. The sensitivity he brings to issues. He may be writing about a family dispute. He may be writing about women abuse. He may be writing about his own struggles with his mental stimulation. He is able to pick up on that, immerse himself in it, and then extrapolate it. He has this uncanny ability of being both passionate and dispassionate. That's what draws me to his works.
Zeke he was equipped with an incredible intellect, which certainly helped him. It was also, he was equipped with what Hebrew would refer to as chutzpah. If you look down 2nd Avenue and you look at him riding his bicycle with laundry that he has to deliver, and he runs into 2 or 3 white boys, and there's a clash. And he was short, he was small. I had the same thing coming from Paarl going to Cape Town. So there's nothing unusual there, but he had the wherewithal to handle that, probably better than most of us ever had, you know.
I passed standard 6 in the first class. When I was in standards 3 and 4, I envied the boys who were in the lead. It conjured all sorts of pictures of what shape their brains were. Those boys seemed to fetch their honors so effortlessly, and I had to work very, very hard in order to pass a test. When I gained first-class pass, I became afraid of myself somewhat. The class teacher presented me with an English book of adventure stories for boys.
I'm grateful that I came here, and St. Peter's gave me a start in life, and set me on the road to the road of education, so that I became aware of the heights I've got to reach. If I hadn't come here, I don't think I would have had that, right? And that is kind of incentive, and also sharpened my instincts for what I should learn, and so on. Also, it provided for me a kind of companionship I didn't have in Maravastad, where the companionship there was a different order altogether. It was a kind of companionship of survival, just to survive, right? As a band of boys going into the Asiatic bazaar and looking for overripe fruit and etc. The survival. Here, the companionship was normal. It was that of boys of the same age and respecting one another, and also feeling protective of one another. That's right, as long as we were within these walls.
I hadn't the slightest idea what high school education was for. So for a long time I was bewildered. Mathematics, physics, and chemistry were utterly new to me. The first form boys and girls just grinned and admired the teachers and cuddled in the grandness of the atmosphere. An atmosphere in which pupils ahead of us gloried in chalking out geometry riders and figures on the nearest board they could find. And then they ganged up to watch the heroes solve the riders. "You'll never be able to do mathematics, my boy," the African mathematics master often said, exasperated. It pained me because I know, as much as he was generally acclaimed, that he was an excellent teacher, if rather impetuous. I was easily the best in English and Latin, and managed to keep up a respectability in the first position in mid-year and promotion tests.
I became conscious of myself. I became conscious of the situation in which we lived in Maravastad, and I became aware of the distance between black and white. Those are the things I became aware of.
For the first time in my life, when I was at St. Peter's, an awareness was creeping into me, an awareness of the white man's ways and aims. There was complete harmony between us and the white teachers at school, and between them and the African staff. And yet no one, Brother Roger or the principal or the community fathers, ever said anything about the attitude they thought we should adopt towards the whites and white authority outside school. Slowly I realized how I hated the white man outside the walls of St. Peter's. I had many times before in Pretoria seen tanned Afrikaners supervise African road gangs. A white man stood with hunched shoulders, hands in the pockets, speaking his instruction with the aid of a trembling index finger. I had taken it for granted that he ought to be there and getting work done by merely pointing a finger. But now, when I came upon similar road workers, I was filled with impotent anger. There was a double-decker bus service for Europeans between Rosettenville and the city. Colored passengers were given a limited corner upstairs. Always. Some white conductors tolerated a few Africans as well. Others didn't. So in most cases, we walked the distance or used the most irregular tram service reserved for Africans. A schoolmate and I took a chance on a bus in town to return to school on a Saturday afternoon. We had already gone out of the city when the conductor came. He glowered at us beneath an ungainly cap that couldn't contain his unruly hair. "What do you want here?" the young bear growled. "We're going to school," I said, showing my school pass. "This is not for Kaffers." "We're coloureds," said my mate. "Black as Kaffers and you tell me you're coloureds," said the young bear. I didn't see any of the European passengers turn to look back. I was struck by their hard backs and hard red necks. "Step down," the young bear said, pressing a button near the door. The bus came to a stop, and we stepped down and walked back to school, about 4 miles. The only thing we ever said to each other, my schoolmate and I, was a long yeah. Every step I took that afternoon seemed to accentuate the pulse of my anger against the whites and my hatred for them.
Education, for me, means is a way of growing up. I mentioned it in some of my writings about education as a process of growth. That you grow up as you are educated, and education means actually growing up. And that is it. You realize your adulthood, and you realize your personhood because of education.
A passion and commitment simply, in a sense that when you grow up in an environment that is so debilitating, for a sensitive personality like him, education, through his own private reading, started out as a closed world, a world where he could lose himself. When you start reading quite a lot, you have an enclosed, very secure, very warm world. But it also then draws you out. It's both centrifugal and centripetal. And the more you read, the more you want to learn more. And the environment then counts for nothing in the end, because you have a much larger world. You live in the imagination, but then you can also say that the imagination is not the only thing. How do I then actualize this? I think starting from there, I think my understanding would be that that's how he developed, self-study purpose, skills for self-study. Remember, Prof did all of his degrees, right? Self-study, UNISA, up to MA. He was never a behind-the-desk student. So starting from that small beginning of reading so much, you could then transfer those skills to BA honors, and MA via correspondence.
The tyranny of time, the tyranny of place. The muck, the smell of it, the fever and the fight, the cycles of decay and survival. Back in 1941, I lived in another slum 50 miles from my place of birth, and it could have been that Pretoria's slum transplanted. Night screams, barking of half-starved mongrels, the rattle of wagons loaded with human manure collected from lavatory buckets, the smell of night, the throb of a life seeking at once some violent release, some affectionate contact, and a corner to deal with the terrors of the night, to take stock of the hurts, the buffetings, the braveries of daytime. Four and a half years later, I had finished my high school course and was eligible for high school teaching, but I would have to continue with private study. I went to Orlando, 1945, and the sounds began again. The gang wars, the police squad cars, the political rallies, the baton charges, cops shooting, high school teaching and further self-education. A new phase for me, teaching English in a ghetto.
My writings are strongly biographical. At the same time, I would like to think that they're also a record of the times in which I live, in which I have lived, and in which I am living. And that record of the times, I would like to think that it's important enough to record, because this is part of our history as an oppressed people in this country. It is really. I would like to think also that it is an autobiography of a people.
When I met Zik, first time I'd been meeting a lot of young men, but I just despised them, you know. They were not into reading, or they were not relating to the outside world through literature. They didn't. When I met Zik, I met a dynamic man who developed me into reading, into appreciating poetry, into looking forward to education. And his influence was greater, very great on me.
A group of singers came from a teacher training institution to entertain the blind at one time. Among them was a young woman, my age, who recited something from Wordsworth to the audience. Something happened, and within a short time, I had arranged to visit her in Soweto when she would be home during the nearing school vacations. It was the final year at college. I surprised myself with my conquest, because in a few moments a pact was made between me and Rebecca.
Okay, he said I was a young girl. Yeah, I was young. I was very, very young. I think I just finished 20 years and then when I met him. Like I said, I felt easily threatened during that time. It was during the Second World War, and like I said, there were so many young men, you didn't know where they came from, who their names were, you know, you didn't know what they've achieved. And I was scared. I didn't want to get into trouble with anybody. But when I met Zik, I felt very, very comfortable.
Rebecca and I had arranged to be married on 29th August 1945, which would be just after I should have started at the school. My mother was very pleased and looked the happiest woman alive. She sent out her invitations and marshaled her friends and relatives who would help prepare the wedding feast. I went to see her on a weekend to get a few utensils for use in my Orlando house. I found she had had an attack and was in bed. She didn't speak much, except to say, "I feel very, very tired," like I'd been walking miles and miles.
Yeah, it was, you know, when I met Zik, Zik was very withdrawn. He didn't open up, you know, and I still remember my mother always saying to me, "You talk too much," saying that to me. "You make this man talk, man, and this man is not he's not the talking type, you know." Yeah, Zik was very withdrawn, and probably because of lack of a strong father. The father was an alcoholic, and he didn't play an important role. And Zik withdrew. You know, males want to relate to another male, and in this case, Zik didn't have a father, you know, and he was very cruel.
After a week, it turned out that I'd seen and heard my mother speak for the last time that day I left her in bed. She was 45. In the train to Pretoria, the thought kept tormenting me. Why did you have to leave at this time, Mother? Just when I was bringing a bride home to make your heart glad. Why? Why? It came again and again while the wheels of the electric train babbled like a laughing idiot as they ground the miles. We buried her on the king's birthday.
Yeah, Zik's mother was very good. Zik's mother was very, very close to Zik. She could move heaven and earth for Zik to get education. Not so much about Auntie Dora and Granny. I didn't know much about them because when I got married to Zik, my mother-in-law had just passed away, so I never got to know them. But the influences that the mother had on him keep on cropping up. He keeps on bringing them up, and he was devoted to his mother.
when I became aware that literature is a creative thing. People create stories through literature. They create stories